On August 23, 2024, at 2:17 p.m., the maternity ward at the Memphis Regional Medical Center was bustling with the usual afternoon activity. Nurses were carrying trays of food, a baby was crying in the hallway, and laughter could be heard from the doctor's office. In room 312, 25-year-old Tamara Cromwell was breastfeeding her 2-day-old daughter. Sitting nearby on chairs were her parents, Gladys and Roy Hendricks, aged 54 and 57. Standing by the window was Tamara's older sister, 28-year-old Janine, leafing through a magazine for new mothers. The room smelled of flowers. 3 bouquets from friends and colleagues sat on the nightstand. At 2:18 p.m., the ward door opened. 30-year-old Wesley Cromwell, Tamara's husband and the newborn's father, entered. In his left hand, he held a bouquet of white roses. In his right, a gym bag. Gladys smiled at her son-in-law and stood up to hug him. Wesley nodded briefly, walked past his mother-in-law, and stopped by his wife's bed. He looked at the baby. He looked at Tamara. "A beautiful girl," he said. "Too bad she's not mine." Tamara raised her head. Wesley unzipped the bag, took out a 1-liter plastic bottle, and splashed its contents in her face. For the next few seconds, something happened in room 312 that witnesses later described in a disjointed and contradictory manner. Tamara screamed, a sound that her mother, Gladys, would describe in court inhuman. Gladys rushed to her daughter and snatched the baby away a split second before the liquid could reach the child. Janine lunged at Wesley, grabbed his hand holding the bottle, and acid splashed onto her palm. Roy punched his son-in-law in the temple, knocking him to the ground and pinned him down. The nurse on duty, Courtney Allison, heard screams from the hallway. She rushed into the room at 2:19 p.m. and saw a young woman on the bed, writhing in pain, and a man on the floor being held down by an elderly man. Allison pressed the emergency button and called security. 2 minutes later, 2 security guards rushed into the room. Wesley Cromwell offered no resistance. He lay face down and repeated a single phrase, "It's her own fault. It's her own fault." Tamara Ann Hendricks was born on March 14, 1999 in Memphis, Tennessee, to a nurse and a school bus driver. She grew up in a small house on Southland Drive, in the quiet neighborhood of Whitehaven, along with her older sister, Janine. Their father, Roy, worked shifts and coached the girls in softball in the backyard in the evenings. Their mother, Gladys, devoted 30 years to St. Jude's Hospital, caring for children with cancer, and taught her daughters 2 things: compassion for others' pain and distrust of men who speak sweet words but don't keep their promises. The sisters were different. Janine, the older one, serious and calculating. At 18, she left for Nashville to study accounting, returning to Memphis 5 years later with a degree and a good job at an auditing firm. She wasn't in a hurry to get married, saying that her career came first. Tamara was gentler and more trusting. She believed in people. She believed that if you treated someone well, they would treat you the same way. Tamara graduated from Whitehaven High School in 2017, enrolled in a medical office administration program, and got a job at Bright Smile Dental on Poplar Avenue. She liked the job, interacting with patients, a regular schedule, and a decent salary. The clinic's owner, 52-year-old Dr. Edward Chambers, valued her for her attention to detail and her ability to calm nervous patients. By the age of 22, she had rented an apartment on Madison Avenue, bought a used Toyota, and started saving money for a down payment on a house. Wesley Cromwell was born on June 3, 1994, in Jackson, Mississippi. He never knew his father. His father left the family when Wesley was 2 years old. His mother, Loretta, worked as a cashier at a Kroger supermarket and raised her son alone. Money was tight, but Loretta did everything she could to make sure Wesley had everything he needed. She scrimped on herself, bought him the sneakers he wanted, and paid for summer camps. Later, she would tell reporters, "I raised him on my own. He was a good boy. I don't know what went wrong." At school, Wesley kept to himself. He had few friends and even fewer girlfriends. Classmates remembered him as a quiet, unassuming boy who sat at the back of the classroom and never got involved in anything. Teachers said he was capable, but lazy. He could have done better if he'd tried. After high school, he trained as a HVAC technician at a local college and, at 23, moved to Memphis, landing a job at Cool Air Systems. The job wasn't demanding. He drove around to warehouses and factories, servicing industrial air conditioners. The pay was decent, $42,000 a year. He lived alone in a rented apartment on Sumner Avenue. In September 2021, Wesley met Tamara. A mutual friend introduced them at a co-worker's birthday party at a bar on Beale Street. Wesley was 27. He was tall, smiling, and attentive. On their first date, he opened doors for her, pulled out her chair, asked about her childhood, and listened as if every word mattered. He paid for dinner, walked her to her car, and texted her 10 minutes after they said goodbye. "Did you make it home? I want to know you're safe." Before Tamara, Wesley had been with 2 other girls. The first was in high school. They dated for 3 months and she dumped him for someone else. The second was already in Memphis. They lasted 6 months. She left, saying he was too controlling. Wesley told Tamara about this on one of their first dates. He said his ex didn't understand that he was just looking out for her. Tamara thought that girl hadn't appreciated a good guy. After their second date, he called her 11 times that day. Tamara decided it was romantic. On their third date, he asked who Marcus was, the guy she'd been texting during her lunch break. Tamara explained that Marcus was an orthodontist at the clinic, a married man with 3 kids, and that she'd been helping him set up his appointment schedule. Wesley apologized. He said he was just afraid of losing her. He said that for the first time in a long time, he had met a woman he wanted to be with. What do you think? Were these the first warning signs that Tamara missed? Or would most of us have done the same in her place? Let us know in the comments. By Christmas, they were living together. Tamara moved into Wesley's apartment on Sumner Avenue. He insisted. He said he wanted to wake up next to her every morning. Tamara was happy. She moved her things over and bought new curtains and bedding. Kayla Mills's friend asked if things were moving too fast. Tamara replied that when you meet the right person, you just know. By the summer of 2022, Wesley had proposed. He took Tamara to a restaurant on the waterfront, got down on one knee in front of the whole room, and pulled out a ring with a small diamond. Tamara cried with happiness. She said yes, showed the ring to her mother via video call that same evening, and didn't mention that they'd had a fight the day before because she'd stayed late at work for 40 minutes without warning him. Wesley hadn't spoken to her until morning. In the morning, he apologized, saying he was just worried. The wedding took place in October 2022 at a Baptist church on Elvis Presley Boulevard. 80 guests, a white dress, a 3-tiered cake with cream roses. Tamara walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Gladys was crying in the front row. In the photos, Tamara is beaming. Wesley stands next to her, his hand on her waist. The grip isn't visible in the pictures. Wesley's mother, Loretta, came from Jackson for the wedding. She sat in the front row, crying with happiness. After the ceremony, she approached Tamara and said, "Take good care of him. He's my only one, all I have," Tamara promised. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved into a bigger house, a rented cottage on Lamar Avenue, 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a swing set. Tamara thought it was for future children. Wesley said he just wanted them to have their own space, and the control stopped masquerading as care. Wesley demanded that Tamara answer calls no later than the 3rd ring. He checked her phone every night, incoming, outgoing, and deleted messages. He installed a geolocation tracking app and called it, "So I know you're safe." He forbade her from meeting with her friends without him present. When Tamara once had coffee with her colleague Kayla Mills after work, Wesley didn't speak to her for 3 days and then said she had broken his heart with her lies. He never hit her, never yelled, never threatened her. He just gave her a certain look, and Tamara knew she'd done something wrong. She learned to anticipate, not to linger, not to laugh too loudly in the presence of other men, not to mention the names of male colleagues, not to wear dresses above the knee, not to wear makeup brighter than he deemed appropriate. She stopped going to company parties. She stopped seeing Kayla. She stopped calling her sister as often as she used to. Her friend Kayla would later tell investigators, she was like a different person after the wedding. Before, she laughed, joked, made plans. Then she became quiet, cautious. She was constantly checking her phone, as if she was afraid of missing his call. I'd ask, "Is everything okay?" She'd say, "Yes, I'm just tired." But I could see it wasn't tiredness, it was fear. Her parents noticed the changes. Tamara began visiting her parents' home on Southland Drive less often. When she did come, she was quiet and distracted. She gave one-word answers and stared at her phone. Gladys once asked her daughter directly, "Is he hurting you?" Tamara replied that everything was fine, that Wesley was just a demanding person, but he loved her. Gladys didn't believe her, but she didn't press the issue. She decided that her daughter was an adult and would figure things out on her own. In January 2024, Tamara found out she was pregnant. The test showed 2 lines that Sunday morning. She sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried. Out of joy, out of fear, and because she didn't know how Wesley would react, she decided to tell him over dinner. She cooked his favorite dish, roast chicken with potatoes. She set the table and lit the candles. She waited for him to come home from work. Wesley came home at 7 o'clock. He sat down at the table and started eating. Tamara watched him and searched for the right words. I have news, she said finally. I'm pregnant. Wesley stopped chewing. He put down his fork. He looked at her intently. Whose? He asked. Tamara decided it was a joke. A bad one, but a joke. She laughed. From you, silly. Who else? She stood up to pour him some tea. Wesley grabbed her wrist. His fingers tightened so hard she cried out. I asked, who is the father? Tamara looked at him and didn't recognize him. This wasn't the man who used to hold doors open for her and listen as if every word she said mattered. This was someone else. Wesley, you're hurting me. He let go. He stood up from the table and went into the living room. Tamara stayed in the kitchen. She rubbed her wrist and tried to figure out what had just happened. That night, he brought up the paternity test for the first time. Tamara was lying in bed when he walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I don't mind having a child, he said calmly, but I want to be sure it's mine. Wesley, what are you talking about? Of course it's yours. Then you won't object to the test. I'm not going to take any test. It's humiliating. Wesley looked at her with that same gaze, cold, appraising. If you have nothing to hide, why are you refusing? Because I'm your wife. We've been married for 1.5 years. I've never cheated on you, and I don't understand where these suspicions are coming from. Wesley was silent. I have my reasons, he said. What are they? He didn't answer. He stood up and left the room. Tamara lay awake until dawn. By spring, the subject of the test came up every week, sometimes more often. Wesley spoke about it calmly, reasonably, without raising his voice. He cited statistics he'd found online. 20% of fathers are raising someone else's children, he said at breakfast. They think it's their child, but it's not. I don't want to be one of them. Wesley, that's crazy. I just want to protect myself. What's wrong with that? What's wrong is that you don't trust your own wife. If you hadn't cheated, you would have agreed to the test. And so it went, round and round, time and again, week after week. Tamara felt like she was going crazy. Her belly was growing, the baby was kicking, and her husband looked at her as if she were a criminal. In April, she couldn't take it anymore. She called her mother one evening when Wesley had gone to the bar. Gladys answered after the first ring. Mom, Tamara said, her voice breaking. Mom, I can't take it anymore. What happened? Did he hit you? No. He thinks the baby isn't his. Gladys was silent for a few seconds. What? He wants a paternity test. He says I cheated on him. He talks about it every day. I don't know how to convince him. I'm tired of proving I didn't do anything wrong. Tamara, sweetie, this isn't right. Do you realize this isn't right? I know. But what am I supposed to do? I'm pregnant. I have nowhere to go. Come stay with us, right now. Pack your things and come over. No, Mom. I'll manage. Maybe things will change after the baby is born. Maybe he'll see the baby and understand. Tamara, please don't tell Dad. He'll do something stupid. I just needed to get it off my chest. Gladys wanted to object, but she heard something in her daughter's voice that made her fall silent. Fear. Not for herself, but that things would get worse if she left. All right, Gladys said. I won't tell your father, but call me tomorrow and the day after. Call me every day. Okay, Mom. In June, things got worse. Wesley found messages on her phone from Dr. Marcus Lee, that orthodontist from the clinic he'd asked about on their third date. Tamara had forgotten to delete the messages. There were 7 of them over 2 months. Work-related messages. Marcus, Mrs. Jenkins rescheduled her appointment for 3 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, thanks. Don't forget the planning meeting is at 9 on Friday. Got it. And 1 birthday greeting. A card with a cake and the caption, from the whole team. which Marcus had accidentally forwarded only to her instead of the group chat. Wesley was sitting on the couch with her phone in his hands. He was reading those messages over and over. Tamara stood in the kitchen doorway and felt everything inside her grow cold. "What's this?" he asked without looking up. "Work messages. Marcus is a doctor at the clinic." "Why are you messaging him personally?" "Because I'm the administrator. It's my job to coordinate the schedule." Wesley looked up. He looked at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because there's nothing to tell. It's work, Wesley. Just work." "Is he married?" "Yes. He has 3 kids. I've told you 100 times. And you think that changes anything?" Tamara felt something snap inside her. 8 months pregnant, swollen feet, insomnia, and a husband who kept asking the same questions over and over. "You know what?" she said. "I don't care what you think. I haven't cheated on you. Ever. Not with Marcus, not with anyone else. And I'm not going to keep justifying my work emails with a married colleague I see twice a week at planning meetings. This paranoia has to stop. Do you hear me? Stop." Wesley didn't answer. He put the phone on the couch, stood up, and left the room. That night, he slept in the living room. The next day, he acted as if nothing had happened. He made her breakfast. He asked how she was feeling. He kissed her on the forehead before leaving for work. Tamara looked at him and didn't understand what was going on. She decided the crisis had passed, that he had finally heard her. On August 15th, 2024, Wesley Cromwell stopped by the Home Depot on Winchester Road. He bought a 1-liter bottle of concentrated sulfuric acid. The receipt was preserved, $18.40. The bottle sat in the trunk of his car for 8 days. On August 21st, Tamara went into labor. Wesley drove her to the regional medical center. He was present for the birth, standing at the head of the bed, holding his wife's hand. He said nothing. At 3:41 a.m. on August 22nd, a baby girl weighing 3 kilograms and 200 grams was born. Healthy. Wesley looked at his daughter, looked at his wife. He said nothing. A nurse asked if he wanted to cut the umbilical cord. He shook his head and left the delivery room. Tamara sent her mother a photo with the caption, "She's perfect. Come tomorrow." On the evening of August 22nd, Wesley's colleague, 34-year-old Randall Pierce, met him at O'Malley's bar on Madison Avenue. Pierce sat down to congratulate him on the birth of his child. Wesley stared into his glass and said, "What kind of father am I if the child isn't mine?" He said his wife had betrayed him and would pay for it. Pierce decided he was drunk and talking nonsense. On August 23rd, Wesley woke up at 7 in the morning. He took a shower, he shaved, he put on a clean shirt. He stopped by a flower shop and bought a bouquet of white roses. Then he opened the trunk and transferred the bottle of acid into a gym bag. At 2:18 p.m., he entered room 312. At 2:21 p.m., the guards handcuffed him. Wesley didn't resist. 11 minutes later, 2 uniformed police officers appeared in the maternity ward hallway. 12 minutes after that, an unmarked grey Ford pulled up to the hospital. A 45-year-old man in a wrinkled jacket and with a folder under his arm got out of the car. A patrol officer was standing at the entrance to the emergency room. "Detective Shelby, Major Crimes," the man said, showing his badge. "Where's the victim?" "3rd floor, maternity ward. Room 312. The doctors are working on her." "The suspect?" "Same place, in the hallway. Security has him." He didn't resist. Shelby nodded and headed for the elevators. On the 3rd floor, Shelby immediately knew which room he needed. A crowd had gathered at the door marked 312. Nurses, security guards, someone in a white coat. A sharp chemical smell hung in the air, stinging his eyes. From inside the room came the voices of doctors and sounds that Shelby didn't immediately recognize. Hoarse, low, more like the howl of a wounded animal than a human voice. A man in handcuffs sat against the wall across from him. He was young, in his 30s, with a crew cut, wearing a plaid shirt with rolled-up sleeves. He was staring at the floor. His face was calm and relaxed, as if he were waiting for a bus at a stop. A guard stood nearby, a large black man with a T. Watkins badge on his chest. Shelby approached the guard and showed his badge. "Detective Shelby, Violent Crimes Unit. Is this the suspect?" "That's him," Watkins nodded. "Wesley Cromwell, the victim's husband. We took him down 2 minutes after it happened. He didn't put up a fight at all. Just lay down on the floor and stay there. What's he saying? The same thing over and over. That she's to blame, that she was cheating on him, that the child isn't his. Shelby crouched down in front of Cromwell. Cromwell raised his head and looked at the detective without any expression, his eyes empty, like those of a man who had made a decision long ago and was no longer thinking about anything. Mr. Cromwell, I'm Detective Shelby from the Memphis Police Department. Do you understand where you are and what happened? I understand, Wesley replied in an even voice. I'm in the hospital. I doused my wife with acid. Why did you do that? She was cheating on me. The child isn't mine. Do you have proof of the affair? Wesley tilted his head slightly, as if the question struck him as odd. I know, he said. I just know. Where did you get the acid? I bought it at Home Depot. On Winchester Road. A week ago, or 8 days, I don't remember exactly. The receipt is in my wallet, you can check it. Shelby exchanged a glance with Watkins. A week ago, 8 days. Not in the heat of the moment, not in a fit of rage. He bought it in advance, stored it, waited for the right moment. He planned it. Mr. Cromwell, you have the right to remain silent, Shelby said. Anything you say may be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you by the state. Do you understand these rights? I understand. Do you wish to exercise your right to remain silent? Wesley shook his head. No, I have nothing to hide. I did what I did. She deserved it. Shelby straightened up and nodded to the patrol officers standing a few meters away. Take him to the car and bring him to the station. I'll examine the crime scene. Room 312 looked as if a disaster had struck. A pool of murky yellowish liquid, partially diluted with water, had spread across the linoleum by the bed. One of the nurses had tried to wash away the acid. On the wall above the headboard, splatters that had corroded the paint down to the plaster. The bedding was crumpled, pushed down to the foot of the bed. On the white fabric, brown stains. A pillow lay on the floor in the corner. On the nightstand stood 3 bouquets in vases, chrysanthemums, gerberas, lilies. White roses were scattered on the floor next to the bed, their petals trampled into a puddle. A little further away lay an empty plastic bottle. Shelby pulled on latex gloves and crouched over the bottle, trying not to step in the liquid. The label read, concentrated sulfuric acid, 93%. For unclogging drains and removing mineral deposits, keep out of reach of children. If contact with skin occurs, rinse immediately with plenty of water. Detective Shelby. He turned around. Standing in the doorway was a man in his mid-30s wearing a blue forensic lab jumpsuit. Anthony Ruiz, 37 years old, one of the best evidence technicians in Memphis. They'd been working together for years. Ruiz, what do we have here? The forensic technician entered the room, carefully stepping around the puddle on the floor, and sat down next to Shelby. A liter bottle. Judging by the residue on the sides, it was full or nearly full. 93% concentration, as indicated on the label. This isn't household cleaning fluid, detective. It's industrial acid. They use this in manufacturing to clean metal. Upon contact with organic tissue, it begins to destroy it almost instantly. Proteins denature, cells die, and necrosis sets in. The higher the concentration and the longer the contact, the more severe the damage. The victim? They took her to the burn unit about 15 minutes ago. I spoke with the doctor on duty. Burns to the face, neck, chest, and parts of her hands. Her eyes were particularly badly affected. She couldn't breathe on her own. They intubated her right here in the ward. Shelby stared silently at the bottle. A liter of acid, 93% concentration, to the face. The child, he asked. He wasn't hurt. His grandmother managed to snatch him from his mother's arms literally a split second before the acid could have hit him too. Another second, and we'd have had 2 victims, or a dead baby. Shelby straightened up and left the room. In the hallway, a short distance from the door, 3 people were sitting on plastic chairs against the wall. An elderly woman, about 55 years old, her graying hair pulled back into a bun, her face swollen from crying, held a bundle with a baby pressed to her chest. Next to her sat a man of about the same age, a large man with a grey mustache and the heavy hands of a laborer. The knuckles of his right hand were bloodied, and there were brown stains on his shirt. A short distance away, a young woman in her 30s sat motionless, staring at a single point, while a nurse bandaged her palms. The skin on them was red, inflamed, blistered in places. Shelby approached them. "Good afternoon. I'm Detective Warren Shelby, Major Crimes Division. Are you relatives of the victim?" The man looked up. His eyes were red and inflamed. "We're her parents, Roy Hendricks, my wife Gladys. This is our eldest daughter, Janine." He paused. "Tamara, how is she? They're not telling us anything." "She's in the burn unit. The doctors are doing everything they can. I'm very sorry to have to disturb you at a time like this, but I need to take your statements. It will help bring the culprit to justice." Gladys looked up. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was firm. "The culprit? You know everything." "He stood right in front of us and doused my little girl with acid. Right in front of us, in front of our child. What other statement do you need?" "I understand, Mrs. Hendricks. Still, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. From the very beginning, step by step." Roy put his hand on his wife's shoulder. "We'll tell you, Detective. We'll tell you everything. Ask away." Shelby took out a notepad and a pen. Roy spoke slowly, laboriously, pausing after every few sentences to gather his thoughts. He recounted how they'd arrived at the hospital that morning. They'd wanted to help Tamara get ready and take her home with the baby. How they sat in the room, talking, laughing, discussing who would ride in which car. How Gladys held her granddaughter in her arms while Janine flipped through a magazine for new mothers. How they waited for Wesley. He was supposed to arrive by 2 o'clock, bring the car seat and help with the luggage. "He walked in at 2:20, Roy said. "I remember because I looked at my watch. I thought, well, here he is at last. He was only 18 minutes late. For him, that's practically on time." "What did he look like when he walked in?" "Normal, calm, a bouquet in one hand, white roses. Tamara loves white roses. A gym bag in the other. I even wondered, why the bag?" "His things were already packed." "What did he do next?" Gladys stood up, wanting to hug him. She always hugged him when she saw him. He walked right past her. Didn't even look at her. He went straight to the bed, to Tamara. He looked at the baby, then at her. "Did he say anything?" Roy clenched his fists. His knuckles started bleeding again through the dried scabs. He said, "Beautiful girl, too bad she's not mine." And he pulled a bottle out of the bag. "Did you realize what was in the bottle?" "No. I thought water, juice, anything. I didn't even have time to think. He'd already splashed it, right in her face. She didn't even have time to cover her face." Roy fell silent. Gladys wept quietly, holding her granddaughter close to her chest. "What happened next?" Shelby asked. She screamed, "Tamara," with a voice. I'd never heard anything like it. Not even when she was sick as a child, or when she broke her arm at 9. She never screamed like that. Gladys snatched the child. Janine rushed toward him, toward Wesley, tried to wrestle the bottle away, and he splashed it on her hands. And I hit him. I knocked him down and beat him until security came running. I should have killed him. I should have killed that bastard while I had the chance. What do you think? If Roy had killed Wesley at that moment, would it have been justice or a crime? Write your opinion in the comments. Janine testified in a quiet, almost inaudible voice. She sat motionless, staring at the wall, while the nurse finished bandaging her. She recounted how she saw the bottle in Wesley's hands, how she rushed toward him, how she grabbed his arm. The acid splashed onto her palm. "I thought I could stop him," she said. "I thought if I grabbed his hand, he'd drop the bottle. I didn't make it in time. He's already done for. You need medical attention, Miss Hendricks. The burns are serious." Janine looked at her bandaged hands as if she was seeing them for the first time. "It's nothing," she said. "It'll heal." "But Tamara..." She didn't finish. By evening that day, Shelby returned to the station with a folder full of statements. He had interviewed everyone. The parents, the sister, Nurse Allison, security guard Watkins, the doctor on duty, and the nurse who had been the first to try to wash the burns. A clear and terrifying picture was emerging. Wesley Cromwell had come to the hospital with acid he'd prepared in advance, deliberately doused his wife, and made no attempt to flee. He sat there and waited to be arrested. The results of the initial investigations were already on the table. A receipt from Home Depot, a purchase of sulfuric acid on August 15th, 2024, 8 days before the attack. Footage from the store's security cameras. Wesley Cromwell standing in the household chemicals aisle, taking a bottle from the shelf, reading the label, putting it back, picks up another one, takes it to the register, and pays with a credit card. Calm, focused, businesslike. Shelby opened Wesley's phone, which had been seized at the time of his arrest. Browser history for the past 2 months. Search queries. Acid burns photos. Which sulfuric acid concentration is stronger? Acid burn treatment. Can a face be restored after acid? Sentences for acid attacks. How long is the sentence for an acid attack? He knew what he was doing. He knew what the outcome would be. He searched for information, prepared himself, and chose the acid with the highest concentration, and he did it anyway. 3 days later, Tamara Cromwell was transferred from the intensive care unit to the burn unit. She regained consciousness, but could not speak. Her vocal cords had been damaged by the acid fumes. Third-degree burns covered 60% of her face, her forehead, cheeks, nose, lips, and chin. She had completely lost her left eye, and her right eye retained only partial vision. Her ears were burned down to the cartilage. Her airways were so severely damaged that the doctors weren't sure if she would ever be able to breathe without a ventilator. She was 25 years old. Her daughter was 4 days old. Gladys and Roy took the newborn. They arranged temporary guardianship while Tamara was in the hospital. They named the girl Hope. Tamara had chosen that name while she was still pregnant. Wesley was against it, saying it was a silly name. Now no one cared about his opinion. Wesley Cromwell was charged with 3 counts: first-degree attempted murder with aggravating circumstances, assault with a corrosive substance resulting in serious bodily injury, and intentional infliction of bodily harm. The Shelby County District Attorney's Office rejected a plea deal and sought the maximum sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The trial began on January 14, 2025 in Memphis Circuit Court. The trial was presided over by 62-year-old Judge Clarence Buford, a veteran of the Tennessee judicial system known for his harsh sentences in domestic violence cases. The prosecution was led by 44-year-old prosecutor Andrea St. James, who specialized in cases against women. The defense was led by 38-year-old state-appointed attorney Nathan Irving. Wesley refused to hire a private defense attorney, saying he didn't care. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, human rights activists, and onlookers. The case had received widespread media attention. In the front row on the prosecution side sat Gladys, Roy, and Janine. The seat next to them was empty. Tamara was still in the hospital and couldn't be there. On the defense side, there was only one woman, Loretta Cromwell, Wesley's 56-year-old mother. She had arrived from Jackson the day before the trial began and took the same seat in the front row every day. She sat motionless, staring at the floor, not raising her eyes to look at her son. Prosecutor St. James began her opening statement with photographs. A picture of Tamara before the attack appeared on the big screen. A young, beautiful woman with brown eyes and a broad smile. In the photo, she is holding her newborn daughter in her arms, looking into the camera with an expression of absolute, unconditional happiness. The photo was taken on the morning of August 23rd, a few hours before Wesley entered the ward. "This is Tamara Cromwell," said St. James, addressing the jury. 25 years old, dental clinic administrator. A loving daughter, a caring sister, a young mother. In this photograph, she has less than 6 hours left to live a normal life. She doesn't know it. She is happy. She has just given birth to a daughter. She is thinking about the future, her child's first steps, first words, taking her to first grade. None of that will happen, not the way she imagined. St. James pressed a button, and the next photograph appeared on the screen. Several jurors turned away. A woman in the back row of the courtroom gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Gladys Hendricks stared at the screen without looking away. She saw that face every day. "And this is Tamara Cromwell today," the prosecutor continued. 5 months after her husband, Wesley Cromwell, doused her with a liter of concentrated sulfuric acid in the delivery room, in front of her parents, her sister, and her 2-day-old daughter. She paused for a long moment, giving the jurors time to process what they had seen. The defendant did not act in the heat of the moment. He was not drunk, he was not under the influence of drugs, and he did not lose control in a fit of rage. He bought the acid 8 days before the attack. We have the receipt and surveillance footage. He researched online what acid burns look like, what concentration of acid is most destructive, and what the penalties are for such crimes. He knew what he was doing. He knew what the outcome would be, and he did it intentionally because he didn't want to kill his wife. He wanted to destroy her face, her beauty, her future, to ensure she lived, but lived disfigured, crippled, dependent on others, so that every day, until the end of her days, she would look in the mirror and remember him. This is not a crime of passion, ladies and gentlemen. This is cold-blooded, premeditated revenge, and the defendant must be punished for it. Defense attorney Nathan Irving built his defense on the grounds of insanity. In his opening statement, he spoke of pathological jealousy as a mental disorder, arguing that Wesley Cromwell suffered from delusions of persecution and was unable to adequately assess reality. "My client is not a monster," Irving said. "He is a sick man, a man who needed help and didn't get it. What he did is terrible. No one denies that. But the question this court must decide is, was he capable of understanding what he was doing? Could he control his actions? I will present evidence that Wesley Cromwell suffered from a severe mental disorder that deprived him of the ability to distinguish reality from fiction." The psychiatrist called by the defense, 53-year-old Dr. Lawrence Hunt of the University of Memphis, testified about what is known as jealous delusional disorder. Patients with this disorder are absolutely convinced of their partner's infidelity, despite the complete absence of objective evidence, Hunt explained. They interpret any and all events, even the most innocent ones, as confirmation of infidelity. Stayed at work 10 minutes late, that means she was with her lover. Smiled at a colleague, that means she's flirting. This isn't just jealousy, it's a pathology. The patient's brain is literally incapable of perceiving reality as it is. Dr. Hunt asked Prosecutor St. James during cross-examination, did Mr. Cromwell understand that sulfuric acid would cause pain and physical injury? Yes, he did. Did he understand that pouring acid on a person is illegal? Yes, he did. Did he try to cover up his crime, to flee, hide evidence, or lie to the police? No, he didn't. So he committed the crime openly, in front of witnesses, knowing he would be arrested and punished? Yes. And yet he knew the difference between right and wrong, between legal and illegal? Dr. Hunt paused. From a legal standpoint, yes, he finally admitted. Thank you, doctor. I have no further questions. Prosecution witnesses took the stand one after another over the course of 3 days. Nurse Courtney Allison recounted what she saw when she rushed into the ward, and her voice trembled as she described Tamara's screams. Forensic scientist Anthony Ruiz presented physical evidence, a bottle of acid, a receipt from Home Depot, printouts of search queries from the defendant's phone. The medical examiner, 41-year-old Dr. Lauren McGrady, read the report on the injuries in dry professional language that made it all the more terrifying. Third-degree burns, tissue necrosis, loss of vision, damage to the respiratory tract, irreversible disfigurement of the face. Randall Pierce, a 34-year-old colleague of Wesley's at Cool Air Systems, recounted a meeting at a bar the day before the attack. I sat down next to him to congratulate him on the birth of his child, Pierce said, staring at the table in front of him. And he looks into his glass and says, "What kind of father am I if the child isn't mine?" I thought he was joking, or that he was drunk and talking nonsense. And then he said his wife had betrayed him and would pay for it. I didn't think much of it. I figured, well, the guy had had one too many. It happens. I should have called someone. The police, his mother, anyone. I didn't call. Now I think about it every day. Mr. Pierce, the prosecutor asked, if you had told someone what the defendant said, could the attack have been prevented? Pierce was silent for a long time. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe, probably, I don't know. Kayla Mills, a 26-year-old friend and former colleague of Tamara's at the dental clinic, described how Tamara had changed after the wedding, about the control, the surveillance, the isolation, about how she was afraid to be 5 minutes late coming home, how she stopped seeing her friends, how she checked her phone every few minutes so she wouldn't miss a call from her husband. She was like a bird in a cage, Kayla said, tears streaming down her cheeks. And I just watched and did nothing. I thought, well, it's their family business. It's not my place to interfere. I should have intervened. I should have gotten her out of there. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe to the channel. We cover real-life crimes so you know how to recognize danger and protect yourself and your loved ones. Gladys Hendricks was the last of the prosecution witnesses to testify. The 54-year-old woman, who had cared for sick children at St. Jude's Hospital for 30 years, sat in the witness box and spoke in an even voice. The tears had dried up in the first few weeks after the attack. She recounted that day in the ward, how happy they were that Tamara and her granddaughter would finally be taken home, how Wesley walked in with a bouquet and a bag, how he looked at the child and said those words, how he took out the bottle. Tamara was feeding the baby, Gladys said. She was holding her in her arms, at her breast, and when it happened, I rushed over to her and snatched the baby. I don't know how I managed it. The acid got on the blanket she was wrapped in. Another second, and it would have gotten on her, on my granddaughter, a 2-day-old baby. Mrs. Hendricks, asked Prosecutor St. James, did your daughter ever cheat on her husband? No, Gladys replied firmly. Never. She loved him. Despite everything he did, controlling her, spying on her, suffocating her, she still loved him. She thought she could change him. That if she was a good wife, he'd calm down, stop being jealous. He didn't. The defendant claims the child isn't his. What can you say about that? Gladys turned and looked directly at Wesley, for the first time during the entire trial. After it happened, we did a DNA test. We wanted to know for sure. We wanted him to know for sure. She paused. The child is his, 100%, his daughter, his own flesh and blood, whom he nearly killed along with her mother. Silence hung in the courtroom. Wesley sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Not a single muscle in his face twitched. Wesley Cromwell refused to testify in his own defense. Attorney Irving tried to persuade him to speak, to explain his position to the jury, to ask for leniency. Wesley refused. He sat in the dock and remained silent, staring at a single spot on the wall. When Judge Buford asked if the defendant wished to say anything before sentencing, Wesley slowly stood up. She cheated on me, he said in the same even, colorless voice. I know she cheated on me, with that Marcus guy from the clinic, maybe with someone else too. The baby isn't mine, no matter what the test says. Tests can be faked. I wanted her to take a test while she was pregnant. She refused, because she knew the truth. She knew I'd find out. Someone in the courtroom shouted, "Shut up, you bitch." Judge Buford banged his gavel. Maintain order in the courtroom, or I will order the room cleared. Wesley continued, ignoring the shout. I don't regret what I did. She deserved it. If she hadn't cheated on me, nothing would have happened. It's her fault, not mine. He sat down. The courtroom was deathly silent. Prosecutor St. James spoke for 20 minutes in her closing argument. Her voice was steady, but every word fell like a stone. You have just heard the defendant, she said. You have heard his words. He shows no remorse. He feels no regret. He still believes that his wife, the wife who never cheated on him, deserved what happened to her. He knows the child is his, and yet he claims the test was rigged. This is not madness, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is not a mental disorder. This is control taken to the extreme. Wesley Cromwell believed his wife was his property, that he had the right to decide how she should look, whom she should speak to, how she should live. And when she dared to object, dared to say no to his demands, dared to defend her honor and dignity, he decided to destroy her. Not to kill her, to destroy her. To leave her alive, but to ensure she would never be herself again. So that every time she looked in the mirror, she would see not herself, but him. His vengeance, his power, his control. This is not love. This is not jealousy. This is violence in its purest form. And for this, he must pay. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. They returned to the courtroom with a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. Judge Buford handed down the sentence, 45 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Wesley Cromwell was 30 years old. If he lived to see the end of his sentence, he would be 75. Wesley listened to the verdict without emotion. When the guards approached to lead him out of the courtroom, he turned and looked at his mother. Loretta sat in the front row, hunched over, her face covered with her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. Wesley looked at her for a few seconds, then turned away and walked toward the exit without looking back. After the verdict was handed down, Gladys Hendricks gave an interview to reporters outside the courthouse. Roy and Janine stood beside her. Roy was holding little Hope in his arms. The girl was almost 5 months old and slept peacefully, unaware of what was happening around her. 45 years is a fair sentence, Gladys said. The law has done its job. But it won't give my daughter her face back. It won't give her her eyes back. It won't give her her voice back. She still speaks in a whisper. She can't speak any louder. It won't bring back the years she'll spend in hospitals, undergoing surgeries, in rehabilitation. She's 25 years old. Her daughter is 5 months old. And this little girl will never see her mother the way she used to be. She will never know her smile, the real one, not the one the doctors will try to reconstruct from what's left. Her father took that from her, her own father, and no prison sentence will ever be enough for that. Tamara Cromwell remains in the hospital. The doctors say it will take no fewer than 15 to 20 surgeries to restore even the basic functions of her face, the ability to eat, breathe, and close her eyes normally. There is no question of restoring her former appearance. No medicine in the world can do that. Her daughter Hope lives with her grandparents in the house on Southland Drive, the very house where Tamara grew up. Gladys shows her granddaughter photos of her mom, the ones taken before August 23rd, 2024. She tells her that her mom loves her, that her mom will get better soon and they'll be together. The girl is still too young to understand. But one day she'll grow up and ask why her mom's face isn't like it is in the photos, and then someone will have to explain it to her. Loretta Cromwell returned to Jackson 2 days after the verdict. To neighbors who asked how the trial went, she replied that her son had died. In a sense, that was true. 6 months after the trial, a reporter from the local newspaper, the Memphis Commercial Appeal, was granted permission to interview Tamara. By that time, she had undergone 8 surgeries and could speak, quietly, with difficulty, but she could. The reporter asked what she would say to Wesley if she could tell him one thing. Just one. Tamara was silent for a long time. She sat in a hospital chair, turned toward the window. "I don't want to talk about him," she said finally. "I have 12 more surgeries ahead of me. And a daughter who's growing up without me. That's what I'm thinking about, not him." She paused. That's all. Little Hope Cromwell took her first steps in April 2025 at her grandparents' house on Southland Drive. Gladys recorded it on video and sent it to Tamara at the hospital. Tamara watched the recording and cried, with the one eye she had left.